Hello everyone, I'm Nora. Today, I want to share a story that happened a long time ago in my life. Perhaps this is the first time I dare to mention it, because this story is an important part that shaped me into who I am today. The story begins when I was 25 years old, when I entered into marriage with my current husband, Michael. Michael is a tall man, with an attractive appearance and a mature demeanor. He has deep blue eyes, neat brown hair, and a charming smile that anyone who meets him will find hard to forget. We met through a mutual friend's introduction. At first, I didn't expect much from the matchmaking, because I thought that love should come naturally. But from the first meeting, Michael left a special impression on me. He was not only elegant but also very polite and thoughtful. The conversation between us happened naturally, as if we had known each other for a long time. From that moment on, I felt in him the warmth that I had been searching for all this time. After a period of getting to know each other, we decided to get married. The wedding was simple but filled with joy and happiness. I still remember that day clearly. I put on a pure white wedding dress, holding Michael's hand and walking down the aisle with the blessings of family and friends. Our vows resounded in front of everyone, and I believed that in my life I had found someone who would protect and shelter me forever. After the wedding, our life was like a sweet dream. Michael was a devoted husband, always caring and looking after me. He worked hard, was the director of a household materials company. Although his job was very busy, he still took time to have dinner with me or chat after a long day. I felt like a lucky woman, because I not only had a good husband, but also a loving home. Our married life, at least in the early days, was like a dream that anyone could dream of. Michael was a caring, successful, and loving husband. He was the director of a company specializing in the production of household materials, a dream position that he achieved through his tireless efforts. However, his work also meant that he had very little time for his family. Michael's schedule started at 6 a.m. every day, when he left home to prepare for work. He only returned home at 9 p.m. every night, sometimes later if there were long meetings or important projects to be solved. Michael's company was not close to our house. Although he drove a luxury BMW, it still took him nearly an hour to get to work every day. When he had to go on unexpected business trips, Michael had to be away from home for a day or two. Every time like that, I often felt empty and missed him terribly. Dinners alone sometimes make me sad, but I always tell myself that all these sacrifices are for the better future of both of us. I console myself that he is working hard not only for himself but also for the happiness of this small family. At first, everything was fine. Despite his busy schedule, Michael always tried to make up for it in his free time. We spent time together in the evenings, having dinner, watching movies, or simply chatting about what happened during the day. Our relationship was also very harmonious, and I could clearly feel his love for me through every look and every gesture. I used to think that we were a perfect couple, and that everything would stay that way. However, as time passed, the pressure of work increased, causing Michael to gradually change. He often came home tired and exhausted after a long day. Dinner was sometimes just a short conversation, and instead of watching movies or chatting with me like before, he often went to bed early to prepare for a new working day. Every morning, when I was still awake, he left the house. This busy schedule made it difficult for us to spend time together. The distance didn't just appear during meals or conversations, but gradually crept into our married life. Michael was often too tired to respond to my desires for intimacy. There were nights when I tried to start a conversation or find a way to get his attention, but he just smiled and said he needed to rest. I knew he was really exhausted, but I couldn't help but feel lonely and empty inside. Even though I loved him very much, I began to realize that my need for love and care was no longer being fully met as before. For a young, vibrant woman like me, this feeling became a big void, increasingly difficult to fill. I told myself that this was just a difficult phase in our marriage, and that our love would overcome everything. But deep down, I couldn't deny that this distance had begun to create gaps in our relationship. At that time, I was still a young girl full of vitality, with the strong desires of youth. My husband, Michael, was often away because of his busy work, and between us, we had not been intimate for a long time. The empty days just passed, leaving me with an indescribable feeling of deprivation. Many times I had to release those feelings alone in my room. It was like a way for me to face the emptiness, when Michael was not there to share or love me like before. That day, like any other day, Michael went to work early, while I stayed home to take care of the family and do housework. Everything seemed normal, nothing special happened. Around noon, after finishing the housework, I felt an uncomfortable feeling burning in my heart, like a smoldering fire. All week, Michael had been busy and had no time for me. That lack made me feel like I needed a way to release my emotions. I walked into the bedroom, where I felt most comfortable, and began to relax. For some reason, I didn't remember if I had closed the door, or maybe I had forgotten in my haste. I let myself be carried away by my emotions, forgetting everything around me. The room was quiet, and I was completely immersed in those feelings, not thinking that anyone could see. I don't know how much time had passed, but when I raised my head, my eyes met a figure standing right in front of the door. My father-in-law, Mr. Aiden, was standing there. I was stunned, unable to say a word. He looked straight at me, his eyes unable to leave the image in front of him. I realized that he had been standing there for a long time, witnessing my every move without me knowing. I was flustered, trying to hide my confusion. "Dad, what are you doing there?" I asked, my voice trembling. Mr. Aiden started, seemingly coming out of a trance. He stammered, "Oh, I was just passing by." But then he added, "Don't worry, I didn't see anything." His words made me even more confused. I hadn't asked anything, but he explained himself as if he wanted to hide something. The silence was deafening, and I felt the atmosphere in the room become heavy. After that, Mr. Aiden hurriedly left, leaving me with a pounding heart, not knowing how to face this situation. All day I couldn't get the image of him standing in front of the door out of my mind, and I didn't know how far things would go. And I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. Late in the afternoon, the pale yellow sunlight of the sunset shone through the kitchen window, dyeing the space a warm color. I was preparing dinner as usual. Michael hadn't come home yet. As usual, he was busy with work at the company. The quiet atmosphere in the house was filled with only the sound of knives and chopping boards and the aroma of food cooking on the stove. I wore a thin white tank top and a knee-length skirt, feeling comfortable at home. While I was concentrating on cooking, I suddenly had a strange feeling, as if someone was looking at me. At first, I thought maybe I was just imagining it, but that feeling did not disappear, but became clearer and clearer, as if that gaze never left me. My heart clenched slightly, my hand stopped moving. I slowly turned my head, and at that moment, my eyes met those of Aiden, my father-in-law. He was standing still right at the kitchen door, his eyes fixed on me, not blinking. At that moment, I clearly felt the surprise in his eyes, but not the kind of fleeting surprise, but a gaze that could not be looked away. I was stunned for a few seconds, then spoke, trying to keep my voice normal. "Dad, what are you looking at?" Hearing my voice, Mr. Aiden startled, as if he had just been pulled out of a distant train of thought. His face turned slightly red, and he stammered, "No, I was just thinking." Then he turned and hurriedly left the kitchen, his steps seeming to falter. I stood there, my heart pounding, feeling both confused and uncomfortable. His actions reminded me of everything before. Ever since he saw me relieving myself in the room, I realized that every gesture, every look he gave me had something unusual. Only then did I realize that it wasn't my imagination, but he often looked at me longer than usual. Not only that, sometimes I caught him smiling to himself when his eyes stopped on me. I tried to convince myself that it was just a father's concern for his daughter-in-law, but I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Worse still, his accidental actions gradually became more obvious. When we passed each other in the narrow hallway, his hand lightly touched mine, even though it was only a fleeting moment, but it was enough to startle me. I didn't know if these things were intentional or unintentional, but they made me increasingly uncomfortable, feeling suffocated in my own house. And many times I saw him quietly observing me from afar, with a look that I couldn't clearly describe. I didn't know if it was curiosity, guilt, or something else, but his presence made me increasingly uncomfortable in this very house. Aiden's eyes that afternoon still haunt me, and I don't know how to deal with this situation or just ignore it as if it never happened. One fine morning, the gentle sunlight shone into the kitchen. Our family was having breakfast together as usual. The atmosphere of the meal was quite peaceful. The clatter of chopsticks and bowls broke the silence. Near the end of the meal, my husband, Michael, looked up at the whole family and announced that he was going on a 4-day business trip. He said it was an important project and he couldn't refuse. I smiled and nodded as usual, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. The days without him always left me empty, and this time was no exception. Michael left the house right after breakfast. As usual, I started clearing the table, stacking the dishes in preparation for washing. In the house, only my father-in-law, Aiden, and I were left. The atmosphere suddenly became quieter than ever. I was still focused on my work, but for some reason I felt heavy inside, as if something unusual was about to happen. As I was busy cleaning, I suddenly felt a strange warmth from behind. Mr. Aiden's 2 rough, strong hands suddenly hugged me tightly. I was startled, dropped the towel in my hand, my heart pounded, trying to turn around to look at him. Before I could say anything, Mr. Aiden gently said, his voice hoarse and trembling, "Nora, can I hold you for a moment?" His words made me freeze. My whole body stiffened. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. At that moment, I clearly felt the conflict in my heart. I wanted to resist, wanted to push him away immediately, but my body seemed to no longer listen to me. I took a deep breath, tried to stay calm, and said, in a firm voice, "Dad, you can't. Doing that is wrong." But Mr. Aiden did not let me go. He tightened his arms around me, his breath tickling my ear. I could feel the tension in his body. He continued, his voice filled with emotion that I could not tell if it was regret or pain. "Nora, I know this is wrong, but I can't hold it in anymore. I've kept this inside for too long." I trembled, feeling both shame and anger. I tried to break free from his embrace, but he held me tight. Then he continued speaking, as if he wanted to pour out all the feelings he had kept hidden for so long. "I can't forget that image. I didn't mean to look, but I can't stop thinking about you. I'm sorry, but I can't control myself anymore." Hearing these words, I felt like everything around me was collapsing. My face was red, not only from embarrassment, but also from anger and panic. I tried to push him away once more, this time with all my strength. Finally, Mr. Aiden let go of my hand. I turned around, looked straight at him, my voice trembling but full of determination. "Dad, what you are doing is wrong. I can't accept this. Please stop here." Mr. Aiden bowed his head, his eyes avoiding, but then quickly looked up, his eyes showing a strange determination. He stepped closer, his voice as if trying to suppress something. "Nora, I can't hide these feelings anymore. I know this is wrong, but do you understand? Since that moment, since I saw you, I can't stop thinking about you. Do you know how much this feeling hurts me?" I stepped back, my hands gripping the edge of the dining table, my heart pounding with anger and fear. "Dad, this isn't right. This is our family. You shouldn't be thinking like this." But he didn't stop. He took a step forward, his voice urgent, almost pleading. "Nora, just this once. I promise I won't let this go any further. Just this once. I can't hold it in any longer." I turned away, trying not to let his eyes waver. "Dad, please stop. This is a family. We can't do anything to break it up." Mr. Aiden let out a breath, but he didn't back down. "Nora, I can't forget that image. I tried, I really tried. but I couldn't. You're the only one who makes me feel alive again, after all these years of being alone. You don't understand." I felt a surge of anger, mixed with guilt and helplessness. I turned around, looked straight at him, my voice more determined than ever. "Dad, I can't. I will never do this. This is my family, my husband. Please stop now before things become irreparable." My words were like a strong blow that made him stunned. He looked at me, his eyes full of pain and disappointment. After a long while, he lowered his head, his voice hoarse. "Nora, I'm sorry. I don't deserve to be your father-in-law. I don't know why I acted like that. It's just. I couldn't control myself." I kept my eyes coldly fixed on him, trying to stay calm even though my heart was pounding with mixed emotions. I took a deep breath, then said, my voice trembling but firm, "I hope you understand this has to stop right here. This is our family, and I would never do anything that would cross the line." Mr. Aiden was silent, only nodding as if accepting what I said. Then, he took a step back, his eyes filled with regret and fatigue. He turned around, bowed his head, and walked heavily out of the room. His footsteps echoed in the hallway, as if carrying a heavy guilt. As he faded away, I stood there, my whole body shaking. I breathed a sigh of relief, but my heart still couldn't calm down. I clenched my fists, trying to calm myself. I knew that if things went any further, he and I would both cross the unforgivable line. And from that day on, my father-in-law almost disappeared from the daily routine of the house. He rarely went out, often staying in his room, leaving everything as if it had nothing to do with him anymore. Whenever he appeared, it was only for a few short moments when he quietly passed by, not saying a word, not looking at me. The atmosphere in the house became heavy, and his silence was an invisible reminder of what had happened. Michael had no idea. He thought his father was just going through a sad phase or feeling lonely as he got older. One day, when he noticed that Aiden was no longer as enthusiastic about gardening as he used to be, Michael said to me at dinner, "I think Dad is tired or something is wrong. He doesn't go out as much as he used to, and he's not interested in the things he used to love. Maybe I should take the time to talk to him, but honestly, I don't know where to start." I just nodded, trying to keep my anxiety down so as not to reveal anything suspicious. "I guess Dad just needs some time off," I said, my voice soft but my heart in turmoil. I knew Michael didn't suspect anything, but his words made me feel even more guilty. Only I knew the real reason Aiden had withdrawn, and it haunted me every day. I often wondered if things would ever go back to the way they were. I wanted to forget it all, to be as normal as if nothing had ever happened. But Aiden's eyes, when he looked at me, on the rare occasions we saw each other in the house, still carried an indescribable heaviness. Not resentment, but a dull pain, as if he were trapped in his own insurmountable guilt. I don't know what to do. Try to ignore everything, or face it to find a way to resolve it. Either way, I still feel that the distance between me and him, as well as the peace in this family, is getting further and further away. I can only hope that time will help everything fade away, but deep down, I know these wounds will never heal. After all, I realize that the moral boundary is something that should never be crossed, under any circumstances. Immediate emotions, moments of weakness can cause irreparable consequences, hurting both myself and those around me. I understand that silence or avoidance is not the way to solve the problem, but only makes things worse. The biggest lesson I learned is that I need to be strong and stand my ground, respect myself, and protect the core values of the family. Through this story, I want to share with everyone an important lesson in life. Always maintain ethical boundaries and personal values. Sometimes, immediate emotions or difficult circumstances can make us get carried away, but remember that the consequences of crossing these limits can destroy everything you have: calmness, steadfastness, and the ability to say no. Wrong situations are the ways to protect yourself and your family. I also advise that in family relationships, understanding and communication are very important. Don't be afraid to share your feelings and concerns with your loved ones, especially your spouse, to avoid misunderstandings and unnecessary distance. Always cherish what you have. Don't let moments of weakness destroy the happiness you have built. My story ends here. If you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thanks for listening and see you in the next videos.